the skills. After you've learned to perform and sequence the skills, you'll get to practice them in simulated emergency situations. This teaches you to adapt your emergency responder skills to real emergencies.
Are you okay?
A medical emergency arises. As an emergency responder, you know that if you assist, you can save or restore a patient's life. You can reduce a patient's recovery time. And you can make the difference between a temporary or lifelong disability. But even knowing this, sometimes people hesitate to help. Even people with CPR and first aid training. They may feel anxiety or guilt about the situation. Sometimes they're afraid they'll do the wrong thing. In some societies, people are afraid they'll get sued if the situation doesn't work out right. And there's the fear of communicable diseases. As an emergency responder, realize that none of these concerns need prevent you from helping in a medical emergency. Let's look at why. First, let's look at the fear of infection. You may hesitate because you are afraid of being infected by the person you are assisting. This is a concern, but remember your training includes learning to use protective barriers to minimize the risk of disease transmission. By using barriers, you're highly unlikely to get any disease or infection from someone you help. Second, focus on helping, not perfection. You want to do the best you can, but it's unlikely a minor error will make much difference, much less hurt or kill a patient. Focusing on perfection tends to make people hesitate in a real emergency. Do not hesitate. Help. Remember, adequate care provided is better than perfect care withheld. Third, learn to trust your training. During the scenarios, you'll find that what you think you forgot comes back when you provide aid. At first, things feel awkward. Then suddenly you've got it, like getting back on a bicycle after not riding one for years. Remember this feeling. You can trust it in a real emergency. Fourth, be decisive and act. Usually there's more than one right way to handle a situation. Circumstances don't always provide clear direction. Start helping immediately. To help you be decisive and act, Emergency First Response has developed an easy-to-use prompt to remind you of the important steps needed to assist someone in need. The Emergency Care at a Glance Decision Guide provides you with comprehensive primary and secondary care directions. This is a must-have addition to your first aid kit at home and on the road. Fifth, you may be concerned about your responsibility when helping another in need. You may hesitate because you're afraid of being sued. In general, the fear of being sued should not stop you from providing emergency care. Many countries have Good Samaritan laws which simply say that as a layperson helping another, you cannot be successfully sued if ultimately things don't work out well for the patient. Your training in this course will show you how to provide help within the protection of these laws. Good Samaritan laws will generally protect you if you provide care within the scope of your training as an emergency responder. Ask for permission to help. Act in good faith. Are not reckless or negligent. Act as a reasonably prudent person would. And don't abandon the patient once you begin care. The exception is if you must do so to protect yourself from imminent danger. Finally, don't worry about making a person worse. The most serious medical emergency is when a patient isn't breathing and has no heartbeat. Sometimes people hesitate to help such a patient, fearing they'd make him worse. As an emergency responder, realize you cannot make such a person worse.
Hey, Kev. Susie, go call for help.
Okay.
Hey, Kevin, are you all right? Kev, it's Steve. Can you hear me?
A person who isn't breathing and has no heartbeat is already in the worst state of health. Again, remember, you cannot make the person worse, but you may be able to help this person. You don't need to fear providing rescue breaths and chest compressions. You can trust your training. Take a moment to relax, think of your training, then step forward and help. CPR, Cardiopulmonary Resuscitation, helps to oxygenate the body when the heart isn't beating. You do this because if CPR begins soon enough and if emergency care arrives quickly, then it may be possible to restart the patient's heart. CPR won't usually restart the patient's heart. Instead, it extends the period during which it may be possible to restart the heart.
Nice move.
Nice.
Take it. Take that shot. Take it. Todd, it's Richard.
Realize that CPR doesn't guarantee that the patient's heart will restart. In fact, most of the time, even with CPR, it doesn't restart. This means that you can never know whether providing CPR or any other aid that's called for would have made a difference unless you step forward and provide help. If you provide CPR and the patient's heart doesn't restart when medical care arrives, realize that you did everything humanly possible. But if you could have provided CPR and didn't, you may spend the rest of your life wondering whether it would have made a difference. Don't let that happen. Trust your training and help. Remember, adequate care provided is better than perfect care withheld. While you are taking this course, don't be intimidated. Naturally, you'll make mistakes during the course. It's a normal part of learning. So if you make one, just adjust and try again. If you already knew what to do, you wouldn't be taking a course. You'll have plenty of time to practice, build your confidence, and be ready to help someone in an emergency. Also, have fun. That may sound odd considering the seriousness of what you're learning, but you'll learn more and learn faster when you enjoy the learning process. Keep it light. Your ability to use a skill effectively weakens when you don't use it for a while, but once you've learned it, it comes back much easier than learning it the first time. The more recently you practice the skill, the easier it comes back. The same is true for your emergency first response skills. Hopefully you won't need them often in real emergencies, so you want to practice to keep them fresh. Here's how. First, watch this video from time to time so you remember the skill steps and the information that relates to using them. Second, run through practice emergencies with other emergency responders in your family or among your friends. Try to get some CPR practice. If you don't have a CPR mannequin, use a stuffed sack that's the right size or even a pillow, but never practice CPR chest compressions on a person. Doing so can interfere with the person's normal heartbeat. Finally, refresh your skills with an instructor in the Emergency First Response Primary Care (CPR) and Secondary Care First Aid refresher at least every 2 years. But refresh more often if you can. When you complete the update, you receive a current Emergency First Response completion card. When you recognize a potentially life-threatening emergency, you help with the first 3 links in the chain of survival. Link 1 is early recognition and call for help. Link 2 represents early CPR. The third link is early defibrillation. The fourth link, early professional care and follow-up, is for professional healthcare providers. In a life-threatening emergency, early professional care is very important. The sooner emergency medical professionals arrive, the better the outlook for the patient. The emergency responder does not replace professional emergency medical care. In the chain of survival, your role as the emergency responder is to summon emergency medical aid and to assist the patient until it arrives. Activating EMS is so important that in most circumstances, if you're alone and there's no one else to activate the EMS for you, you call first, then assist the patient.
You might have a couple injured passengers.
An exception to the call first rule is if the patient is a child or an adult that has experienced submersion in water or other incident that is likely to be a respiratory-related event. In these cases, you provide CPR for about 1 minute, then call emergency medical services.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Take this arm and grab your other hand.
With EMS on the way, the care you provide increases the chance that advanced care will help the patient when it arrives. Your training in this course is based on handling emergencies where you have an emergency medical system. If you need to provide emergency aid in areas away from EMS support, you should continue your education with more advanced first aid training.
Check your abdomen now.
Providing emergency care can be very stressful. After the incident and after the emergency medical professionals take over, it's time to take care of yourself. You may wish to talk about the event to a friend or family member. You may find the situation upsetting, especially if things didn't work out well for the patient.
Still, I feel like I let him down. I mean, what about his family? I feel like I let them down too.
Talk to someone if it helps, including a healthcare professional if necessary. But remember that as an emergency responder, your training only gives those you help the best chances possible, not promises nor guarantees of medical miracles. No matter how it works out for the patient, feel good about the fact that you reached out to help another.
All right. Maybe you're right. Maybe doing something is better.
Before helping someone, it's important to ask for permission to help. You do this with the responder statement.
Okay, I'm an emergency responder. May I help you?
Yes, please.
You simply say, "Hello, my name is," your name. "I'm an emergency responder. May I help you?" It's important to get the patient's agreement if he is alert and responsive. If a patient is unresponsive, give the responder statement anyway.
I'm an emergency responder. May I help you?
If the patient can't answer, most laws assume implied consent. This means the law recognizes that in a serious situation, the patient would almost certainly want help. Laws vary from one region to the next, so check those that apply to you. If an adult refuses your help, don't force it on her. Instead, talk to the person, stressing the need for care and monitor her condition without providing actual aid. Depending on the situation, however, you could activate EMS at this time.
We were playing basketball.
Have you ever wondered how medical professionals know what to treat first when they help someone? They monitor the ABCDs of the patient's lifeline, which provide the sequence for helping the patient. The ABCD sequence of emergency care will help you remember what to do. You'll practice monitoring the lifeline and the ABCDs as you learn emergency first response skills.
May I help you? Steve, can you hear me?
A stands for assess the scene. Alert emergency medical service. Apply personal barriers. And assure the airway is open so the patient can breathe. B stands for breathing. With the airway open, you check that the patient is breathing. C stands for circulation and chest compressions, prompting you to begin chest compressions if a patient has stopped breathing. The chest compressions artificially circulate blood to vital organs. D is for defibrillation, the process that attempts to restart the heart. You'll learn more about defibrillation a bit later. S reminds you to apply